Time now for a special edition of Encounter here on Bott Radio Network. Here is Oklahoma Regional Manager Joseph Palmer.
So probably everyone listening out there has a smartphone. I have a smartphone. Maybe somebody has a smart watch. Maybe they have a smart thermostat on their home. I mean, there's smart things you put in your shoes that tell you where you're going, how far, how fast. Have you ever heard of a smart city? With all those convenience features to our lives, it presents itself intuitively as what a grand idea. Make our lives easier. It's a wonderful thing. But is that the truth? And we're going to find out. And not only that, we're going to get some talking points today that you can use and share with others about what is going on in Oklahoma, specifically in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, regarding a smart city, what it is. And we'll let you judge whether it's a good thing or not, and then what can be done. So our guest today is, in fact, a smart city agenda expert. She is Dr. Julianne Romanello. And so you're in for a treat. Mother of four, former college professor at TU, NSU, and TCC. She's a native of Tulsa, so she knows what's going on. PhD from Baylor. And so, Dr. Romanello, welcome to Encounter.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
You bet. And also with us today is the president of OCPAC Foundation, where we just came from. It's starting to be our habit, Bob.
You bet.
Coming over here right after meetings.
It should be.
Absolutely. We got some really good speakers, and Dr. Romanello was one of them. So, welcome, Bob.
Thank you. The speakers just seem to get better every week, as if that's even possible.
Right, exactly. So if anybody hasn't yet come to an OCPAC Foundation meeting, Bob, would that be something you'd
Absolutely.
approve?
Absolutely. It's encouragement. It's sort of like church. It is so Christian-oriented, but we talk about government and our societal duties and just have phenomenal speakers, as you'll find out today from Dr. Romanello.
All right. So without further ado, Dr. Romanello, can you give us an overview of what is a smart city? Let's start there.
Sure. It is. It's basically a model for optimizing resource efficiency at the municipal level. So you're going to see, regional planning boards, metropolitan planning organizations, your city governments that are developing partnerships with tech companies, with government providers at other levels and private corporations to really, this is how it's sold, to deliver services that are going to improve your quality of life. Now, those services are all delivered in a way that's supposed to be cost efficient and reduce lag time and just make sure that people get what they want as quickly as possible.
So would my smartphone and smart thermostat and all of that fall into this?
Yes, those all fall into it. I mean, those are usually, held privately, but they're going to connect with this governmental public network of sensors that are embedded everywhere to share information and in that way help to manage resource use.
So before we go any further, that sounds awfully sci-fi-ish to me, and it kind of probably somebody is thinking conspiracy theory related. Probably that's not happening. But where are you getting the data to make the statements that you're making?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you look at Oklahoma City or Tulsa concretely, we have smart city transportation plans that are on file with the U.S. Department of Transportation. If you go to the U.S. Department of Transportation website, you will see that they have transit-oriented development policies, and that is all a policy that relies on smart infrastructure. So this is our own government, and it's not just in the Department of Transportation, it's in many different departments. And then I also look at corporate white papers, documents from foundations, think tanks, and so on. So this is not the dark web. It is not YouTube. It's all published information that anyone can access if they just look.
So it's out there. Anybody can find it.
Right.
And they don't even hide it, right? They call it smart cities, correct?
Yes. I mean, you can look at Smart Cities Dive, which is an industry that promotes the implementation of smart city infrastructure. And they tell you exactly what they're doing. Complete streets, 15-minute cities, livable, walkable environments, place making. It's all right there. You just have to know where to look.
So can you help us? So when you described what smart cities are, you used a lot of words like resource efficiency that for me only have a secondary meaning. I can't relate them to something specifically in my life. So can you help us as you go through that, take those meanings that they use to obfuscate the truth and translate that to how that relates to us?
Sure. So, generally people would like to use resources well. We don't want to use more than we need to. We want to, make sure that we're not being wasteful. So that phrase appeals to a lot of people. But when it's used by people who are designing smart cities, what they're really interested in is a program of rationing and control. And they have an ideological program that is behind all of this. That is the Sustainable Development Program. It is the narrative that human beings are imperiling the planet and so on. So in order to address those kinds of ideological issues, what they really want to do, and ultimately I think it has to do just with controlling God's creation, right? But they're going to manage, say, your access to water. So you have a smart water meter on your house, and as we're going to just keep an eye on the press, and you're going to see that we're going to start talking about water shortages, droughts, the need to make sure that our water is clean and safe, and that's all going to occur through a smart meter that is able to manage your consumption in your own private home, regardless of your ability to pay for it. You just will lose access if the community has a need for everyone to do their fair share.
Maybe, I wonder if they don't realize this is Oklahoma and we can jury rig just about anything. So maybe they're under. Yeah. So Bob, you mentioned this is Julianne, that this is about people controlling God's creation, at least as part of what's going on. Bob, can you put this in a biblical context for our listeners?
Well, the first thing I think of is the Tower of Babel. And when I saw the city that they are in the process of building now in Saudi Arabia, my thought was, this looks to me like the Tower of Babel. I said, how many churches, how many Presbyterian churches, how many Lutheran, Baptist, Catholic churches are going to be part of that construction process? I'm thinking zero.
So some of our listeners might not be aware. What do you mean Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, a big deal. I don't know if it's $1 billion, $10 billion dollars they have allocated to build a smart city. It looks like a huge mirror, 10 miles, no, it's 100 miles long. Incredible project. 60 Minutes this weekend did a part of their film. They filmed it and bragged on it. And I'm thinking, do these people at 60 Minutes not know what's going on? And I'm thinking they probably do and aren't telling us. But a city like that built by a government or corporate America is not going to accommodate those of us who would like to build churches there. There won't be churches. And we'll be hooked up. So and I would say that, like the Tower of Babel, it had no chance. And of course, theologically, I am very optimistic in my eschatology. And I look at this, I think we need to take action and understand that it has in Jesus' name, it has no chance. But we have to be active.
So, Dr. Romanello, can you give us your perspective with your deep insights into all the aspects of it on the impact specifically on God's people?
Well, I think that there has been a decades-long process of dumbing us down.
No doubt.
And so when we move into a smart city model, that presupposes the fact that we as individuals need a collective structure to make our decisions for us, that we need programs to make sure that we are non-biased to our fellow human beings. We've moved away from talking about personal responsibility for being charitable, and instead
Let the government do it.
Right, and we have moved away from reading good books. So really, I think that the the sort of worship of the technologies that goes on, especially like I forget the name of the Saudi Arabian cities, at Noam or something like that. I think the name has significance.
It does, and I can't. It's something like that.
It's something like that.
You know, I might be able to check it real quick.
Yeah.
On your smartphone.
On the
I see that.
smartphone, I know
Oh.
all this information that we have access to. But, you know, when we are building these creations, then people are worshiping those. They are going to view the attraction instead of doing what is right and best for our soul, whether that is being engaged in prayer, meditation, learning for its own sake, all of those truly human qualities. We're losing those. We're giving our ability to think up to the AI.
Bingo. And that seems to be a prevailing issue. So the children in our schools are not there. You know, only a small percentage are actually at grade level with their, whether it's math or English, whatever their capabilities are. And so that you're saying that plays right into the whole idea of a smart city?
Yes, because, you know, the programs and software and algorithms, just the physical technology that runs a smart city is too much for most of us to comprehend. You have to have very specific training and expertise to even know how to work those systems. So all of us are going to be in the dark when it comes to evaluating whether or not they are producing good results. But also, I think human beings have a longing to be free, to learn, to explore, to make their own mistakes. And the smart city infrastructure shuts that down, and it has to train young people from a very tender age not to like to do that kind of exploring and learning. So they're put in front of a screen that delivers all sorts of experiences directly into their mind. It's all passive, and over time that can't help but have an effect, right?
That sounds just like what our enemy would be up to take what God created, beautiful, all the beautiful things, and not every, you know, there's sin, I understand, but those creative aspects, you know, God created and he called it good, right? And then take it away and make it not that way anymore, if, you know, were he to be successful.
Right.
So, wow, okay. So you're saying it being about control. So they want, you've already said, controlling our water would be a part of it. What else do they want to control?
You know, there will be food rationing. You know, one thing that I've looked at that I think is really important, although it's sort of boring, you know, it's not like nanobots, but it's transportation. So transit-oriented development, that's a phrase that everyone should become familiar with, because that's how municipal planners will they will curb your freedom. They will take away your ability to use your car. And so it will be justified in terms of needing to move to a low-carbon future. It will be justified in terms of promoting individual health and wellness through active transportation. But come on, we live in America. We love our cars. We always have. No one's taken my minivan from me.
Amen.
But these plans are putting into place cameras that are going to charge you by the mile. I mean, Oklahoma has a road use charge task force that's already convened, and they are doing studies to move away from gasoline taxes toward the taxation of miles traveled. Now, how are they going to know how many miles you've traveled? It's going to be, if you have a car that's smart, mine probably isn't as 2012, you know, so I'm going to hold on to it. But if you have a newer model car, it will communicate with intelligent communication systems. But there are also the cameras that are looking at your license plate and tracking and tracing wherever you go.
Already there.
Yeah.
So, Road Use Charge Task Force.
Yes.
Can you theorize, maybe you don't know perfectly, but can you theorize how does something like that worm its way into the bureaucracy, past our executive branch and all the protections that are built in?
Right. I think that, you know, a lot of the policy for implementing smart cities is very narrowly crafted. It looks like you're just taking a specific issue, like maybe making state revenue more efficient, something like this, and you're trying to link it to some practical application. So these are questions that are not really salient to the public because they're boring. They're narrow and focused, and so I think people just simply are not connecting all of the dots that are in place. And I am an optimist, so I like to think that people who are implementing this agenda are doing so probably unawares. And they're trying to think, okay, well, our state needs more revenue to meet, say, its entitlement obligations. How are we going to do that? Well, this might be an effective way. And then citizens simply aren't being vigilant. And I am guilty of that myself. It took working at a university that was restructured for me to really have a clue. But now's the time for people to wake up and start being vigilant. You need to go to committee meetings, commissioners' meetings, city planning meetings, and just show up and be a force to remind our elected officials and appointed officials who they work for.
And when they do that, they're going to want to feel like they're pretty well informed. Nobody wants to go in there ignorant and then get beat up by someone who talks down to them. How can they do that? Do you have resources?
I always think that it's good to approach people from the position of educating them first and say, I have looked into this. Here's what I've found. I would like to share my findings with you. And, try to bring them along in a gentle way, maybe at first, knowing that we're out of time. But then otherwise, if they don't listen, if they're impervious to it, then you have to bring friends. And then you have to use the public opinion, the power of public opinion to really force people to look at what they don't want to look at.
And what a great way to open a conversation with a legislator or a bureaucrat. I've done some information. I've done some research, so they're getting free primary research. Would you like to see what I've found? My answer to that would pretty much always be yes, because that sort of firsthand information is, not always easy to come by.
Yeah.
So that's genius. Okay, Bob, I know you've got thoughts that are waiting to percolate out, so what do you think?
Well, when she said that we are being dumbed down, that has been going on for, I'm convinced, at least 100 years. And Dr. Angelo Codevella was becoming a good friend of mine. He wrote a number of books. He was one called Character of Nations, and one of the things he says about people who have been under communist dominion for periods of time are just different people. They are subservient-minded. And that is, in my opinion, what is going on in America today. And we have become sheep. And we just presume that if the government says it, it's right. That's why we all, not all, but many obeyed Mr. Fauci, Tony Fauci, and obeyed whatever the government said we should do with this big crisis. We should do that. There were a few who questioned that and said, that actually makes no sense. Because I do have a background in science, and I know that makes no sense. But most just go along. And that's what Dr. Codevella said happens when you're under a tyranny. Well, I think we've been sort of under a tyranny. We're certainly, as a people, sound asleep. And we have to wake up and realize that we are in a war on many fronts. And this is one of the significant fronts.
So what you're saying is it's important for people to get educated, figure out what's going on, and be able to speak intelligently about it to power, right?
Absolutely, and we have to not be consider that there's a wall between us and the state legislature, and we need to hold those who we've elected accountable. And we have some men today who've been elected who are just absolutely off the rails. And of course, I'm thinking about our educational system and what's going on with Ryan Walters, who the majority of Oklahomans want to be in that position to clean the pornography out of the state. And we have legislators who are saying, hey, evidently they like it because they don't want that legislation. But the same goes here. We're thinking, how can this be possible? Well, when I did my research for Dr. Romanello, coming to us, I realized that it was, 6 years ago, the Wall Street Journal was writing about this, and professors at Harvard were speaking about this, and they said this is going to transform the nation. Yeah, they're right. It's going to transform the nation. It's not what most of us who don't trust government would like the transformation to look like. Mm-hmm. We do have to wake up.
So, which city is farther along and toward a smart city, Oklahoma City or Tulsa?
Well, Oklahoma City is technically a cognitive city, so that means that it has even more predictive analytics capacity in its smart city infrastructure than someplace like Tulsa, but we're not far behind. And, I looked at Edmond's city plan, and it's probably worse than Tulsa's. And so, it is important to note that a smart city plan is not simply about technology, but it's also about innovative finance. It's also about rezoning, moving people into stack and pack housing. So earlier you asked about what sorts of resources will be controlled. Your housing will be controlled, land use will be controlled, economic development will be controlled. And this is something that conservatives really need to dig into, is that phrase economic development, because it means a developed economy. Developed by whom? Not the people, but it's going to be giant corporations who are using government proxies to put in place centralized management of the economy.
And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say probably approaching 0% of our audience desires to be controlled. As if, have you run into anybody out there that says,
nobody wants to. And everyone thinks that they're very independent. But, this is something that has been a stroke of evil genius in, again, the educational system, is using people's desire to do well by their fellows against them. So, a lot of the language that I look at and looking at the reset, smart cities, and so on has to do with unified visions, common good. We're in this together. And when you really start to look to the origins of that kind of thinking, it goes to a policy of communitarianism, which is a synthesis of sort of communism and capitalism. And what it does is it promotes the common good over individual rights. Now, especially for people who are Christians, who are of any faith, there is some sort of good to self-sacrifice. Well, that has been really weaponized so that now we no longer think as individuals, and we don't want to. We think it's bad.
That really sounds, I'm going to use the word diabolical. So they're really using, it sounds like, the Oklahoma Standard. They're weaponizing the Oklahoma Standard.
Yes. Yes.
I'm literally speechless. So in the last few minutes, I would like to touch more on what we can do. I don't think we've given our listeners a place they can go and get information and get empowered to have these conversations with people so that we can all work together to change the ideology of Oklahoma. So where would you suggest they start?
I would say, if you go to awakeoklahoma.com, that is a great resource of all sorts of things related to protecting liberty and fighting the New World Order. Also, get involved with your local GOP groups. For all of the criticism of practical politics and parties, I have seen GOP groups that are really driven by the people of those groups getting out there and educating each other and pressuring legislators. So find those. OCPAC, wonderful resource that I have just been introduced to. There are many active groups. 2A, Oklahoma Health and Parental Rights. We have so many in Oklahoma. Just get involved someplace.
Yeah, okay. So get involved somewhere, get plugged in, and probably one of those groups, maybe probably all of them, are thinking about smart cities, right? Has that been your experience as you talk?
Yes, I think so. So, as I go talk to different groups, I find that, they're all keying in on one aspect of the agenda, and they sort of need the broader picture, and they are looking for it. So it's just a matter of time before everyone connects these dots.
So there are multiple groups, including awakeoklahoma.com. That's one place you can go to start getting information, but OCPAC Foundation.org, not a lot there right now, but we're working on building that out and making it kind of a clearinghouse for conservative thought here in Oklahoma. Also, okhpr.com or org, I can't remember, so that's another one. And then OK2A, if you just Google that, it'll probably, at least for now, Google will let it show up in the search results. So what other thoughts did you have?
I would say, people can visit my website. It's www.heartsoverhexagons.com. I need to update it more regularly. I also have a YouTube channel by that name, and with lots of local talks. A good friend, Brian Mayberry, is kind to donate his services of recording those, so you can see what's going on in Jenks, Sapulpa, Tulsa, across the state.
Right. Because that's kind of that's where you live. So that's
yes. We have to start locally. It's very important. We work locally and then use our power to pressure our states to then pressure the federal government to clean out the criminals.
You agree, Bob?
I totally agree. And one of the thoughts that came to me, I know this is a tough nut to crack, but for the past at least 100 years and more, and some more, pastors have been living in closets. And as they look on their congregations, they don't realize that by far the vast majority of those congregations have children in government schools, and they have to begin speaking out about these all cultural issues.
Amen.
The congregations depend on that information.
So basically, their marching orders are talk.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dr. Romanello. Thank you, Bob Linn. Thank you, Chuck, for running sound for us. And thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this special edition of Encounter here on Bott Radio Network. Email us with any comments to kqcv@bottradionetwork.com.